Welcome to Authenticity, which is all about shaping high-performance workplace culture. My name is Simon Tyson, and in my role as CEO of the Real Learning Experience, I've been working with organisations for nearly 30 years, helping them create exceptional workplaces. As a leader, you know the daily effort needed to create a culture that produces great results and in which team members and customers are happy. Those things do not happen by accident. The journey isn't always easy. And that's why this podcast exists. Make sure you subscribe as we share our experiences and strategies to help you transform the workplace culture you have into the workplace culture you want.
Hi listeners, this is just a quick editing note. We recorded this episode about a month ago before Simon left for overseas. And unfortunately, upon editing, there is quite an echo in Simon's audio in the guest interview. We feel rather than not produce this episode, we've been able to play around with it a little bit. And whilst the quality isn't 100%, we feel the content is strong enough and will provide some really good topics for our listeners to hear. Because it was recorded a month ago, the good, the bad and the what the at the start of the episode does talk about some topics that occurred around 3 to 4 weeks ago. So I'll pop some links into the episode notes so that if you need to refresh your memory, you can. Thanks so much.
Well, hello, Kirralea, and welcome to another episode of Authenticity, Transforming Workplace Culture. How are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm in sunny Launceston, Tasmania, about to fly out to Canada, and really excited to be doing this podcast before I go. So, what are we starting with?
The good, the bad, and the what?
So, Kirralea, I'm going to overlook the fact that your kids were used as slave labour and and made to record that introduction. Tell us, what are we working with? So let's start with the good. What's our good today?
Well, I'd like you to tell us about our good today because you are the one that has this topic.
I do indeed. Kirralea, for me, the good, and this is something that people have forgotten about, and that's almost the bad, but I'm just going to focus on the good, is the Ukrainian president, because I'm still following what's happening in the news and what's happening in Ukraine. Look, we're not a political show, but it's a disgrace. And I really love it when I hear commentators call it the Russian invasion rather than soft-footing it round it, because that's what it is. It's an attack on the Ukrainian people. And I look at the Ukrainian president, and as leadership goes, he's doing an incredible job. Now, what he was like as a president before this, I have no idea. He might have been the most unpopular president in the history of Ukraine, but the courage and commitment and solidarity being shown by the Ukrainian people is incredible. And some of that comes from the solidarity, courage and commitment of the Ukrainian people, but some of that is inspired by their leader, who is front and centre, is vulnerable, is owning this whole process with his people. And I think as a leader, he's won my admiration. He reminds me a lot of Jacinta Ardern, who was incredible for her people through tough times as well.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Now, our bad is also you, when you're going to talk about an example of something
I am
not so great.
Yeah. And, last week we learnt a little bit about my currency with AFL football when I named the Essendon coach as, one
John
that
West.
retired about 14 years ago or something like that. But
Not long ago, but yeah.
putting all that aside, the Melbourne Football Club, what the heck is going on there? in all honesty, tell me this is a coincidence. We've got the premiership team from last year, hadn't lost a match this year. All of a sudden, they've lost 3 matches on the stretch. And in the middle of that, they have an incident where an injured player is, I think, with concussion, is out in a restaurant drinking, which is against the club's protocols.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, not against our company protocols, by the way, but against the club's protocols. No one stopped him. No one said anything to him. Some of the leaders of the club, some of the most senior people in the club, some of the other players sat and let it go. And what you walk past is what you accept. And I think this might be a little nod to one of the things that you're going to talk about a bit later. But they accepted it, and then they accepted the escalation, I'd imagine, of some behaviour that culminated in a punch-up outside the club. Now, you tell me, a team that hasn't lost a match for 20 weeks or whatever it was, including a grand final, loses 3 on the stretch, and we start to see stuff like that happening at the club. Tell me that's no coincidence.
Yeah, look, I've read a little bit about this, and you can't read everything that's printed in the news, I know, but it is interesting, a couple of the comments that have been made, that he probably wouldn't, even if he was told to stop, he probably wouldn't have, and that's kind of who he is. And it reminds me of that person in the workplace who's that prickly person, or the person that everyone avoids, or that's just who they are, and so we adjust to them. And it's just not the culture I think they want to be adopting.
And honestly, I don't normally take a completely black and white attitude on it, but if someone says that's the culture, screw the culture, then my response as a leader is, I'm sorry, you're no longer part of the culture. It doesn't matter how good a player you are, you're not part of that culture. And I'm always one for, if people make a mistake, to help them come back from it. But if the mistake is consistently screw the culture, I'm sorry, you just can't be part of that. And I just can't accept that a club that's been so successful and all of a sudden loses 3 matches, and we start to see issues like this happening. I can't accept that they're not connected in some way.
Yeah, agree.
Tell us about your what the.
Now, we're not going to go into too much detail with this, because we do have a front page leadership episode coming up with this. But my what the, I could not go past Elon Musk and his email to all his staff that he sent regarding their requirement to be back in the office. And I think for anyone that isn't aware of what happened, Elon Musk, who is the owner of Tesla, sent an email to all his staff. The subject line was "to be super clear." And basically, we'll go into this in more in our front page leadership episode, which will be the next podcast to be released. But it was basically saying that everyone at Telstra was required to spend a minimum of 40 hours in the office per week. And this was a real statement of post-COVID times. And he's demanding everyone come back to the office. He believes everyone needs to be in the office, and that they must be visible in order for them to be a presence there.
If I can't see you working, you must not be working.
Yes,
that's the mindset that sits behind this.
Yes.
I'm just going to say about that, what the?
It is a very...
How did that go?
Yeah, that was good. I'll let the kids give you their feedback on that.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little threatened by the kids, but anyway, I thought mine was pretty good.
But it was when that came out, it hit headlines around the world, and it was a very look, clearly while they have a production line happening with Teslas, like there are certain people that need to be there, but I think it's taking a big backward step into what COVID proved for a lot of workplaces. And I think it really, it was more for me the tone of the way he spoke.
Yeah.
But we'll chat about that more in our front page leadership podcast.
And just to give you a sense of where I'm going with that, I think Elon Musk is a backward step in himself.
Right. I look forward to unpacking that in the episode. So, our next is our quote. So this was one of your ideas, Simon.
Yeah, and I do love having an inspirational quote. And because quotes contain so much wisdom, and some people, they mean nothing to, but some people, it's something they can put on their office wall. It's something they can hang on to. They might hang on to it for a week, for a month, for 6 months, but for whatever period of time they hang on to it, it acts as sort of like a guide to them. So now you've picked a quote from our guest today.
I've actually picked a quote after I listened to today's, and I listened to it because I actually wasn't able to be there for the interview. So when I listened to it back, it just I was like, this is great. And the quote comes from our guest for today's episode, who is Ken Wood, and it is, if you see something, you've got to say something. And I think that is just so important in people's leadership journey, that the behaviour you walk past is the behaviour that you then accept. And if you see something, then you've got to say something. And that just, for me, that was a real standout part of there was so much gold in what you spoke to him about. But for me, that was a real leadership quote.
Absolutely. And I refer you back to the previous discussion about the Melbourne Football Club. And
it applies
compare
so much.
Yeah. Compare that to the organisation Ken's a part of. And listeners, it is a great interview, despite Kirralea's absence. And it is well worth listening to. I think I make the comment in this interview that Ken could have interviewed himself. There is a lot of gold there. So take the time to listen to it.
Absolutely. And now finally, for our first part of this episode, we have our resource that we're going to recommend to our listeners.
Yeah, and I like this segment because having a book, a film, something that is, it could be a TED talk that is really meaningful and will make a difference. And this is a book that I had sitting on my shelf for a long time, and I spent a lot of time in the car, and I stopped deluding myself, and I downloaded the audio book using Audible and listened to it as an audio book, and then kicked myself that I hadn't read it sooner. And it's the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of Team by Patrick Lencioni. It is a great read. Or a great listen in my case. And it's told as a fable, and that made it easy listening for me. But don't assume the fact that it's a fable means that it's flippant or lacks substance. It's a book that if you as a leader listen to, will give you 3 or 4 great takeaways that if you apply them in your workplace, you will see a difference in the workplace culture. And it's inspired something that I talk about a lot, which is, and I guess we've got our own take on it, but listening to that sparked a thought in my mind about the interplay between tension and culture, and tension and conflict, which is such a big dynamic in workplace culture. So well worth a listen.
Yeah, it is. And I loved it when I read it, and I had spoken to my husband, who's also in a leadership role, and he actually, at a later date, was given the book to read by his CEO. And Kirralea's actually told me to read this before, and so he brought it home and read it. And my husband isn't a big book reader, but he really enjoyed it, and his feedback to me was that was actually really helpful to read.
I just need to check in on something here, Kirralea. He read it when his boss told him to, but not when you told him to.
I know. The irony.
I had thought he was a wise man, but anyway.
Simon, now seems like a good time to go to the discussion that you had with Ken. Now, Ken Wood is the Executive General Manager, Queensland of Southern Cross Austereo, and someone that you've worked with a lot previously.
Yeah, I've worked with Ken many times over the years, and at a number of different organisations. and someone I'm not working with currently, although I wish I was, because I would like to think that that what they're achieving there was a reflection on us, but they're doing this through their own efforts, and they're an amazing example of creating the ideal workplace culture, or the workplace culture you want. And they're not perfect, but they're committed to the journey towards it.
Absolutely. It's a brilliant discussion, and I'm very, I had a lot of FOMO in the fact that I wasn't able to be there because I had another commitment to be at, but I'm really excited for our listeners to hear this.
Yeah, let's bring him in.
So Ken, great to talk with you again, mate. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Simon.
Good to have you here. So you and I have worked together a fair bit over the years. Where did we first bump into each other?
Oh, I think it was probably back in the early 2000s when you were responsible for the company's training.
And that was with
Southern Cross.
With Southern Cross Austereo in those days,
Yes, right.
Yeah. So what was your role back in those days?
Sales manager of Rockhampton, and then I think while we're still working together, I was in Townsville as well.
Yes. I recall some enjoyable trips to Townsville.
At the right time of year, Simon.
I actually seem to recall a lot of you taking the piss out of me because I was sweating at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning. So
you always wanted to run early in the mornings for your triathlons. Those rest days.
I also enjoy walking to work in the mornings just to clear the head. And often you're only staying in a hotel 2 or 3 kilometres away, which seems really logical. And in most places, that's a really nice way to start the day. But in Townsville, it just means you're alive in a ball of sweat, which you never recover from for the whole day.
So, you were walking before those counting steps was popular.
That's it. Hadn't even heard of a smartwatch in those days. So, mate, tell us about your role now.
So now it's the official title is Executive General Manager for Southern Cross Austereo for Queensland. So look after from pretty big area. When I say that, Cairns through down to Gold Coast and Toowoomba, so about 2,000 k's between remote offices. Yeah. And I sort of just look after. Well, we have a matrix structure, which is kind of very functional: sales, operations, IT, finance, that sort of thing. So I'm the sort of the glue that pulls all those functions together. So heavy operations, heavy people and culture.
Yeah. Now, for those listeners who were paying attention, you talked about when we met back in the early 2000s, and you were at Southern Cross Austereo, and of course, still with the organisation today. But when I say still with the organisation, I really mean back with the organisation.
Yes.
You've done a few things in between.
Yeah, so I went and worked with the Seven Network for a little while, close to 8-9 years, and then went and worked in newspapers as a regional general manager here. So I had about 15 newspapers under my remit. And then just when I think Southern Cross took over did a deal with Channel 9 for the affiliation, an old colleague of mine I used to work with and sat on a few boards with asked me to come back and utilise my television experience that I'd used at Seven to come back to Austereo. So I've been with SCA for going on 6 years now. And it's quite interesting to have worked here, say, 15 years ago, and then to come back and see they're almost unrecognisable companies now. So very, very interesting.
That's a great segue. So just tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about what the difference is and why they're unrecognisable.
Yeah, look, I think when I first worked with Southern Cross Television, I mean, it's gone through a few different owners since then. So, and I wasn't here for those journeys, but when I was here, it was very, it was kind of, we had a bit of a purpose, but there was no kind of real values, and it was kind of left to each state and then each branch in that state, so Cairns office towns, to kind of run pretty much how it wanted to. So it was really up to the individual teams and leaders as to how they ran their teams. So you did get a little bit of a mixed kind of culture through that time. Where now, there's a very strong purpose. The purpose is everyone's aware of the purpose. Everyone has input into the purpose, and we also have the very clearly defined values, which form part of our sort of behaviour framework. So totally different. Much. I would say much more aligned, much more open and positive from my experience.
Fantastic.
And I'm not saying it was bad, by the way. I'm just saying that the difference is quite remarkable.
Yeah, it was. And look, having been around at both ends of the spectrum myself as an outsider, but the difference is quite remarkable. And it's interesting, isn't it, that often people look at those structures and systems and so on that have been put in place, and it almost feels like, that spontaneity is gone, that and there's all this formality we've got to do, the corporatisation, but it's actually been a really good thing for you.
Yeah, well, I think I think when a company has a purpose, but the purpose can become very outcomes based. It's very output. This is what we want to do. This is how many widgets we want to make, or we want to be the best in class at this point.
Yeah.
But there's it's more of but there's no real values or kind of cultural framework. It's kind of I would call it old school. Just get on with the job. You're all adults. You know what you're doing. Off you go and do it.
Yeah.
And that works if you've got a specifically strong leader in a particular market.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that from the top down and right across the whole business, you're going to get mixed results.
Yeah, and that was certainly the case. Certainly having been around in those days and looking at those markets, there were some markets that performed significantly better, and it didn't come down to the circumstances in the market.
And I think what I've noticed is if you can literally do a road trip from Cairns, Townsville, Mackay, Rocket, all the way down the markets, and the same language, the same feel, you're in the same, if you had a visitor, they could tell you're the same company in all those offices, right around the 65 that we have, where beforehand you might go from Cairns to Townsville and you'd almost think they're two different businesses.
Yeah. That's a really good insight. Where do you think that came? I think I know where you'll go with this, but I'm just interested in your thoughts. Where did the difference come from?
I think having that really clear purpose, and not just created by our senior leadership team or the board, but actually wrestled with by the whole company. So, I'm part of a senior general management team, and what we do every year is we sit down and we talk about our purpose and we talk about whether it's still relevant, still fit. Now, that might mean it's a complete change in focus. It might mean a shift in just one or two words, or even in the order of those words, depending on where we're at.
Yeah.
But once we decide that that's probably where we want to be, then we consult the general management team to consult with their team and seek feedback as to whether or not it's, people are going to buy into it on the ground and it's right. And then it comes back to us, and we might tweak, change, or clarify a certain component of it. But once we've done that, then we're good to go for the next 12 months.
Now, I'm really keen to hear, because a lot of organisations, and I'm sold on an organisation having a purpose. If you don't know why you get out of bed in the morning, then, it's hard to get excited about work. And if you don't have a clear purpose, you actually end up recruiting people who need a job. Whereas when you've got a clear purpose, you end up recruiting people who engage with the purpose. And I know which ones are going to be easier to work with and happier in the workplace and so on. How do you go about making sure, though, that purpose isn't just that corporate shiny stuff, it's on a plaque, it's in it, but that it actually becomes part of real life? What's your process there?
Well, I think, we've just gone through it quite recently. So probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we got all the leaders we have a company purpose, which we're involved in, which is exactly what I just explained to you then. Mm-hmm. But inside the company one, you've got statewide ones, because every market is at a different place. It's almost like that property clock. The economic clock and where you're at and the circumstances for each market and each team are slightly different. So there's little local nuances. So we kind of go, well, let's talk about what our purpose is. Let's wrestle with that for a day or two, which we do, come up with it, and then we all agree. And once we've agreed, and I've shortcut the process there, right? But we get the outcome, and everyone agrees on that. Then it just becomes part of everyday language. Like it's, obviously forms part of the plaque on the wall, so to speak. It forms part of our agendas. It sits on the first thing on our agenda. So we changed our purpose 2 weeks ago, slightly, and we have a fortnightly leadership team, and the first thing now on that agenda talks to the new purpose, and we'll do for the next 6 months. And then sharing examples of how the purpose has come to life. And that's
fantastic.
In real terms, exactly what we did today.
So you're lifting it off the page and you're making it real by making it part of the everyday discussion. at a really senior level.
I think the other thing too that we do is it's with the framework that we have around our values and behaviour. I think if we actually, the purpose actually, I don't want to say gets thrown back in your face because that's not the right terms. You get reminded of your purpose if around particularly change management or decision making.
Yeah, fantastic.
So we have, we're proudly national, but we're also fiercely local in our content. So proudly national because we're big right across all the states and multi-markets. But our secret sauce is being hyper local and knowing where the potholes are in the street and talking to our clients and changing communities by being the megaphone. So if we got proudly national, fiercely local, but we're making a decision to consolidate to save a few bucks on t-shirts, so we're going to get them all done in one market.
Yeah.
Well, one of my managers will turn around and go, no, we're proudly national, fiercely local. We need to be buying from local businesses.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're not living our purpose, and that would happen. That happens every day.
Awesome.
Whether it's a news story we're covering and we're going state first and we should have went local first, it gets brought up and reminded as a barometer on whether or not we're living the purpose.
I love that, the living the purpose. And you're going from a nice intention to actual action and behaviour. So something that I heard you say, that you sit with that purpose as you try and refine it or reshape it or even reflect on it for a day and a half. That's a lot of senior management time. And what we often find is organisations are in such a hurry to tick that box, they move through without dwelling on that enough, because that's, from what you've said, then sets up a whole decision-making becomes easier because it's all in context of the purpose. Where does that decision fit in context of the purpose we defined? So the time up front sounds like it pays dividends over and over for you.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, sometimes it comes really quickly. Sometimes the first thing that someone says, because, it's about coming prepared, right? And that's one of our part of our culture as well, is you turn up ready to go and you turn up prepared and you've got some homework, not homework, so to speak, but preparation for these meetings. And you've been thinking about it and we've been talking about it, whether it's fit for purpose. So when you actually get to the room, you're actually having great conversations around this stuff. Yeah. And sometimes someone might have thought about it for 2 days and bang, oh, that sounds good. Oh, let's talk about that. We still explore it. We don't just go with something that rhymes. It sounds good. Do you know what I mean? And other times we can have breakout groups upon breakout groups after session to get the outcome, and we can't quite grasp it, but we don't, it's never in the too hard basket. We keep wrestling with it. Sometimes it takes a week or two. Sometimes it takes, the one we had this time was literally, we've been spending a couple of hours working through it. And then on the way back down the hallway into the boardroom after we had a breakout sessions, one of my colleagues said this line. Yeah, that's it. So that's where we ended up. Right. Walking back, we didn't have it on our paper.
That's fantastic.
But it's got to resonate. Everybody has to believe it. And literally, we go around the room going, out of a score of 1 to 10, 1 being you're not convinced, 10 you love it, you tell everyone at your next family barbecue what it is and that you're part of doing it. Where do you sit? And we go around the room, and if it's not more than an 8, we spend time with that colleague talking about, well, what do we need to do, change, or to get it to an 8 so you're part of you feel strongly about it. Because, trust is everything, Simon, as you know. And if I get off the phone or Richard drives back to Cairns, 2,000 kilometres, and he's not convinced about the purpose, that's a long year about him with his team. Not feeling convinced about where we're going.
It's a bloody long drive to stew on something as well.
Exist. Yeah. A lot of petrol stops and sausage rolls on the way.
I'm getting to fly, not so much time to stew.
Just for the record, we do get him to fly.
Although stewing is a really good process, isn't it? If you stew over unresolved issues, it's a problem. But if you're stewing over stuff that we have a phrase in our business, we talk about sending it to the universe. And it's not because we're all mystical or anything. It's just we just know sometimes we've got to plant the seed and then leave it. And as you know, I love a bike ride or a run. For me, that's when those things come. It just seems to. I think my brain's desperately looking for some way to distract myself from the agony of my legs, and I'll come back and something's just fallen into place, and then I'll call a colleague and we'll throw it around, and they'll have another bit of input. But it's a great process. It's worth spending the time investing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I think, you asked before, where did that kind of culture come from? And, the top of it is having a purpose. And then from there, what we kind of work on, we kind of look at, you could almost put leadership into two pots in my view, which is, the skills, the processes, the systems, the tasks, all the stuff that you do day in, day out. And then you've got the other bit, which is people, behaviour, culture.
Yeah.
And working out how much percentage to spend in that space is really important, and not losing track of that. But part of that behaviour piece is actually having that agreed behaviour framework, how we're going to treat each other, which is where our kind of values come in play.
Values come in, yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't have a purpose, you can still have all those values, but you're kind of not sure where you're going.
Yeah.
And your values should, in my view, you should be able to solve problems and provide solutions through the use of your values, right? Everything you do should be able to point to the values and say, oh, we've got a problem here, or this is a bit of an issue or a roadblock. What value can we use to fix this or solve this? So if there's no purpose to solve, you're kind of a bit rudderless, right? If you've got a great purpose, but you don't have any values to solve those problems or an agreed way we're going to treat each other and behave, you can't get that mixed results I was talking about. So, but I think what I've seen in my time here is just understanding and accepting that it's a full-time job. It's that inspiration is perishable kind of thing that most people have around New Year's resolutions. Once you understand, and we do that habits, and it's got to be top of mind. So in our inductions, we cover it. In our interviews, we cover it. We're making sure we're talking about the values. We're making sure we're asking questions around how people have demonstrated the use of those values in previous roles.
Yeah.
It links back to our profiling that we do, the tests, I call them, and all those things. So it's kind of it's part of our KPIs, STIs, quarterly planning, how you've demonstrated. So it's really measurable, and you're held accountable to it as a leader in the business. So and then we have what we call shout outs, which is a celebration where you're shouting out one of your colleagues or someone that you've seen demonstrate those values, but in a ecosystem inside the company, so everyone sees that.
Yeah, fantastic. Ken, you could just about interview yourself. I mean, honestly, I had written down some questions, and you're just exploring the whole topic beautifully, mate. So,
well, you need to earn your money here, Simon. So I'll take the back seat. What's your next question?
I'm going to have to come up with a real cracker now. Look, it was really interesting to hear you get into the values, because we're big believers in the overlap of purpose and values, and we describe them as the mission or the purpose or whatever we want to call it as the promise that we make to the people we serve, and the values are the promise we make to each other. And when we bring those two together, that's what being great in our organisation is about. As long as we've carefully defined those. And I think as long as those two things accurately define the workplace culture we aspire to create, because that then holds us at a high benchmark. One of the measures we believe of values is that they've got to be lived. And one of the tests of whether they're genuinely lived, and I love all the examples you've talked about with shout-outs and guiding decision-making and so on, and they're amazing ways to bring values to life. But another bit of a test is what happens when someone doesn't work according to the values. How does that happen in your organisation, in your teams?
Yeah, look, it happens all the time. And I'm not saying it's in a sinister way. I think sometimes we get busy, sometimes we're in a certain work rhythm, and sometimes people just aren't aligned to them. Or I call them a poor batsman out of form. They've been great for a year or two, but for some reason they're not themselves, and they're not consistent with the values. So one of the things we do is we just ask lots of questions, and it generally goes along the lines of, if it was you, Simon, I'd say, Simon, you okay? How are you going? Genuinely seeking to see if you're okay, because it's unlike you to be behaving that way, or not acting within the values. So, and then depending on your answer is depending on what the conversation looks like. But the conversation is had. We have this big belief that if you see something, you got to say something. And I think, but what we did identify early, Simon, was people wanted to say something, but they didn't know how to.
Yeah.
So they would put it off, or they'd kind of use sarcasm to disguise the true message. There was all these things that were making it a little bit difficult to bring up that they're unhappy with someone's behaviour.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time, particularly the last 12, 18 months, working on a framework, on a feedback framework within the company that everybody could use.
Oh, fantastic.
So that if you had that feeling in your gut that you didn't like that behaviour and you wanted to say something to a colleague or your boss or to one of your teammates, you actually had the framework to do it, and everyone was using the same framework.
Yeah, and I gather you've spent a lot of time helping people develop some comfort and skills around that.
Yeah, and even just simple things like, and it's just an evolution, right? So, we used to talk about fierce conversations, remember? Tough conversations.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a hard or a difficult, tough or fierce. Now we're just having a conversation around your behaviour.
Yeah.
I want to give you some feedback, Simon, because I care about you and I want you to do better.
Yeah.
And then you go into the framework, which is very specific. That has enabled people to speak quite freely in a common language around behaviour.
Yeah, we call them authentic conversations, and the reason we do that is that I agree with you that a fierce conversation potentially implies the wrong outcome or the wrong process. We want people to raise issues that are challenging with courage, but we want them to do it with honesty and respect and all that sort of stuff as well. So that's why we call it authentic. So talk about what's real for you, but do it in the right way. So go on, mate.
Oh, no, I was just saying the other thing too, what we found was just letting people know that time, like you can have a conversation with someone a week later.
Mm-hmm.
If you did something, Simon, actually I could come back to you next week and go, listen, you said something last week that I didn't agree with. I've been thinking about it, but it won't leave me. So can we have a conversation about that?
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to have the answers right there in the moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes time and space is actually a fantastic tool.
Yes.
So a lot of time around how to give feedback so that people feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah, fantastic. And you've answered a question I was going to ask about, when people need to be accountable to the values and accountable for the way they interact and so on. Where does that come from? And it sounds to me like it's not just top down. It could come from anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all probably appreciate that, leaders in the business have a disproportionate impact on culture or and positive or negative or decision-making and all that. But ultimately what we want to see is that, like I said before, trust is such a huge thing. Like I might only get to Cairns, I'm picking on Kansas because it's the furthest market away. You're doing a great job. Let's pick Mackay. But the reality is when I hang up the phone or jump off the VC, you got to have trust that what you've talked about over the last 12 months in that conference, in that meeting is going to actually happen in real time on the ground in that market without anyone's oversight.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
absolutely,
I think trust is a huge thing, and in particular those markets where the leader has to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you've just got to do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Mentality, which But what the other thing we do really, I think, what I've seen really work well is we do surveys with human synergistics. So global company like Gallup and all that. So we do that and we benchmark each market off that year on year.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
But when we have a small gap between surveys, we do pulse surveys. There are 10 to 15 questions from our HR department around how we're tracking, how we're going, how you're feeling, how engaged are you, all that sort of stuff. So we're really thirsty for data across all markets, across the whole business to make sure we're agile in relation to moving where we need to if there's a cultural issue.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, it's really hard for a leader to give someone some feedback exactly as you said if they're not modelling the behaviour themselves.
Yes.
But they'll soon get called out, won't they?
Yes, absolutely they will. Yep.
Yeah. So do you think that as the senior leader there in Queensland, do you think if you did something that wasn't consistent with the values or that at least people perceived wasn't consistent and potentially a very junior person, would they come to you?
Yep.
Huh. You say that without hesitation.
Well, I've had examples of it. I mean, you can't say every single person because you just don't know that. But, I remember within a 24-hour space, and I had one of my colleagues say to me, I was having, we're not all perfect, Simon. I had a little below-the-line moment. I think it's about the amount of time you spend below the line, by the way. I had a decision go against me, and one of my colleagues rang me up, and I said, I can't believe this happened. And they said to me, "Are you okay?" That feedback thing? Yeah, I'm okay. Why? Oh, I never expected those words to come out of your mouth, he said to me.
Huh.
And I said, "Oh, right." And he said, "I thought you held yourself to a higher standard." That's quote unquote from a colleague.
Wow.
And I went, I didn't like it to start with, but, I said, we had a chat about it. I went back to the hotel room because I was traveling that week. And the next day I rang them and thanked them.
Yeah.
But it stung. It stung more. It stings more, I think, the feedback in a good way from a colleague or a person who works with you, a junior person, so to speak, than it actually does your boss, to be honest.
Yeah, because it's their job. Whereas the other,
expecting that, right? But when a colleague pulls you up in a very professional manner and respectful manner, and I've had the same thing from junior people, people who have just started in their first week. Once they see the induction and how serious we are about feedback. Genuine, you call them authentic. In our business, we call them genuine conversations.
Yeah, fantastic.
And they understand that we are seeking this feedback loop constantly.
Yeah.
People do test it to see if you actually, and see it. They do. They test it to see how serious you are.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, I can imagine we always say that culture tends to spin people out, and if you've got a culture that's mediocre, it spins good people out because they can't find their place.
Yep.
If you've got a culture that's working really well, it spins people out who just can't buy into that. And I can imagine there'd be people that come in and feel this and go and love it and embrace it and test it out. And there might be others who almost go, I'm out of my comfort zone. That's a good early on, isn't it?
It really is, and I think it's easy to. I think the time it takes to get to that point is a lot quicker than it has been, but I've seen before. Interesting enough, Simon, too. When we talk about the values in the induction and in their meetings and things and whatnot, people who come to our business who have actually come from another business who are very high on values actually say to us, "Why are we talking about the values so much?" Like it's almost is there something that's gone wrong in the past? Is that why you're so? Because it's like no. It's just that when you're coming in, we all know it. I mean, I think we've all worked for businesses where the values and the purpose have been done a year or two earlier.
Yeah.
You weren't part of that process or that consult or that work group, but you've come into the business and no one talks about them. You don't know what they are.
Yeah.
So, but it. I don't want to swear, but we kind of have a no idiot policy. And those values help, find that out pretty quickly if you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic, Ken. There's just so much I could talk to you about because I said to you when we were chatting as I was setting the recording up, I said to you one of my challenges with you was going to be I would want to go down every rabbit hole. And I'm really conscious of your time, conscious of the length of the episode. If you're with your interest and agreement, I'd love to do a follow-up with you at some stage. But I just want to finish off on one thing. Kirralea couldn't join me today, but you've said something that if I don't follow up on it, I'll be in trouble. You talked about leaders being vulnerable. Tell me about what that means for you.
It's just being real and honest. It's if you make them, we have a really the Queensland team have a saying which is we all make mistakes. We just need to own them, and then we need to get on with fixing them.
Yeah,
and that's as simple as it is. So, take the time to be helpful. Take the time to talk to your team. Be respectful. Get back to people when you say you're going to get to. Back to them. It's really quite simple if it's done with intent. And I think intent is the key word for me. If people's intent is honourable, you can move through really fast. If it's not, things slow down pretty quickly.
And look, as you said, having a really good framework tends to highlight those things.
Yes, definitely.
So, mate, we're out of time, and I know you've got a really busy day. You've squeezed us in, and I really thank you for that. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, nearly as much, no more than I enjoyed a beer with you in Townsville. And perhaps we can do a follow-up at some stage over a beer, because I'd love to.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime,
we,
Simon.
we might have to do a feature-length podcast with you, because you've got a lot of wisdom there, and I know the journey you've been on, and I can see how that journey has shaped you. And it was always clear that you came at things from a really great perspective, but that perspective has just got richer for the range of experiences you've had, and I can see the impact you're having on the organisation there. So congratulations, and mate, thanks very much for being here.
No, thanks for your kind words, Simon. It's always a pleasure. Talk to you soon, mate.
So, Kirralea, despite your absence, what an amazing interview, what an amazing discussion. And really, as I said during that, Ken could interview himself. He's got so much value to add, but I've done enough talking. I'm really keen to hear what you took from that interview.
When I listened to the recording, I just sat here nodding and loving what I was hearing. Like, it was just so great. It just really embodied what we're passionate about doing, and it was just so great to hear an organisation has just aligned so well with their intention and their values. For me, it started off at the start of the conversation where he talked about values and behaviour being the framework, and that living their purpose and the commitment to living it. The words that he used were proudly national and fiercely local. And even down to the fact where, they make sure they order their T-shirts, and when he said it's the simple things that matter, like, that's how dedicated they are to living their purpose.
Absolutely. Yep.
And when he said
there's so many organisations
like that, just sorry to cut you off, but that to me just showed that how much that is the framework for all their decision making. Like, it's every decision that is made falls within that framework. Like, it's if we could create an organisation that did things the way we would love them to do it, that's exactly the way that their values and behaviours should be guiding them.
Absolutely, yeah. Hey, look, so many organisations come up with a convenient marketing slogan that ends up as nothing more than corporate speak, and all their team think it's just bullshit because it's a slogan, but it doesn't have substance. And the fact that someone will call Ken out and say, wait there, if we're fiercely local, then, and I might have that, is that right, fiercely local?
Right. Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah, fiercely local. How can we have our T-shirts made nationally by some national deal? It's such a simple thing, but they're the symbols of authenticity. Is this something we mean, or is this something we talk about? So, we often talk about defining culture, your ideal culture, as that crossover between the promise to the people you serve, so the purposes, as Ken talks about it, and the promise to each other, the values. But if that's not reflected in those daily decisions, and if people can't challenge it, if it can't guide decision making, then they're fluff. They mean nothing.
Absolutely. And when he said you should be able to solve problems and provide solutions through the use of your values, like that messaging is just so important. And that's what we speak to our clients about. We say, if you have values, is this how they guide you? And a lot of people say no. And to hear them say that is how we solve the problems, and that is how, our decisions are made, was just, really great to hear.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, our purpose is that people deserve great workplaces, and that workplaces deserve great people. And every decision we make has to support that, because ultimately our definition of a good or bad decision is a good decision takes us closer to that, and a bad decision takes us further away from it. We don't need to agonise over decisions. We just have to hold them up against that benchmark. And that's such a powerful, it's a benchmark we feel. It's not something we know, it's something we feel. It's in our hearts and souls, not just in our heads. And it's just not hard to make decisions because they're either consistent or they're not.
That's right. I also really liked it when he said that embedding the values and purpose was a full-time job, because I think so many times organisations make values and then they get put in a nice frame, or they get sat on the bench and then it's tick, job done. But for him, when he said They have it's reinforced in interviews and inductions. It drives the profiling of recruitment. It drives KPIs. It drives STIs, quarterly planning. Even the meetings and how people demonstrate the values. They create a real collaborative environment in meetings, and they ask staff how decisions sit with people. And if it's not more than an 8 out of 10, then they have a discussion around why that's not sitting.
Wasn't that a cool yeah.
I know, and I'm just I thought, how many organisations would do that? And it's not wavering on your decision. It's simply just asking someone, why don't you sit there, and having that discussion. And it's almost dealing with the conflict before there's the conflict of saying, where do you sit?
Absolutely.
How do you feel? This is the way we think. Okay, and you either move them forward, or you hear their point of view that might move you back a little bit. But it's that collaborative environment. And when he said it's the collaborative environment that we bring everyone along on the journey, and I thought, wow, that's just so. That is just such an inspiration to organisations who are trying to achieve that.
And not to be in such a hurry to tick and flick this. Because people go, I've got real work to do. I can't sit around and talk about our purpose for 2 days. But if you don't have a purpose, all of the other work you do has no purpose. There's no direction to it. And decision making becomes hard. And the time you invest up front means that everyone's moving in the same direction. You've had those difficult discussions up front. The person who's sitting in that room that says, I'm a 6 out of 10 on this, they have that discussion then, rather than having it 100 times when they're trying to make decisions throughout the year. And people buy in on that purpose. And look, I guess there are times where people say, I can't buy into this purpose and this isn't for me. And good on them. That's a good call to make.
I also really liked when he said it, that the way they've been able to define their purpose and their values has meant that it's really measurable, and they've been able to really hold people accountable to it. And that's good and bad. Like, it's good when they have a real celebration when someone demonstrates the values and they make sure everyone sees that. But there's also a process for when there's that less than desirable behaviour and people just aren't aligned. And when he spoke about how, because they are so aligned with their mission and purpose, that it's almost a self-selection process when someone doesn't align. I thought that's exactly what we speak about. It's when the culture, like we talk about the culture and how if your culture's working well, it kind of spits those people out that don't belong. That's exactly what he spoke about. He said, when people aren't aligned and they're not consistent with the values, it's a self-selection process.
Do you know, the thing that really struck me in that conversation, and this is a challenge to every listener out there, when Ken talked about, and I deliberately asked that question around, what happens with you, Ken? What if someone came to you and challenged you on your alignment with the values and your consistency? And I pushed him on it. I asked a follow-up question because I really wanted to hear, because he's such an authentic guy. I knew he'd be really open about it. The comment he made about that situation he was in, and someone saying to him, I thought you held yourself to a higher standard than that. The challenge I've got for our listeners is, how many of you would put yourself in a position, and this is not a criticism of any of you, it's a genuine reflection. How many of you would put yourselves in a position where you might hear that? And secondly, how many of you would take it without being defensive and just walk away and reflect on it, because you can't process that in the moment? That's okay. And thirdly, how many of you would come to the settling point that Ken came to, of gratitude that someone had the courage to say that to him, and he's a better man because of it, because someone had the courage to tell him something despite his position that he needed to hear. But to Ken's credit, he created a situation where it was safe to do that. And he created that through the values they've got, but he also created that through his leadership style and by being the person he is. And I think that, to be honest, that gave me something to aspire to.
I particularly liked in that part of the conversation where he said it stings more coming from a colleague or a junior staff member, because a lot of people
Yeah.
who would hold a higher position with power wouldn't care about what someone said that was, in their eyes, below them on the organisational chart. But for Ken, because he holds himself as such a leader, the fact that that comment came from, and we don't know who the comment came from, but it leads me to think it was either a colleague or a junior member of staff by his comment, that it actually stung to him so bad because he expected more of himself, and it wasn't until someone reminded him of what, and he had that reflection. And when he said, I had to be prepared to sit in the uncomfortable and really sit in it and reflect, that's not always easy for people to do. And I think that really showed the strength of him as a leader, to be able to sit in the uncomfortable, truly reflect on it, and then come out the other side with gratitude and be so thankful that someone raised that with him so that he can learn and be better next time.
Kirralea, we promise to be short and succinct here, and we're not all that good at short and succinct because Ken's interview, we want to make this episode not go too long. But I've got one more challenge for our listeners because as you were saying that, I couldn't help but think about the perspective of the colleague who said that to Ken. And another challenge I want to ask our listeners, and again, this is not a criticism, this is a genuine reflection, and it makes me reflect myself. How willing would I be to say something that direct, but to do it carefully and respectfully, and to do it in a way that they knew that my intention was good? How willing would I be to say that to someone? And how willing would I be to say that to someone who's potentially more senior than me, or at least my peer, rather than someone that I felt entitled to say it to because I was their manager.
And I think this was another part that really made me think how well they do it, is that came off the back of, if you see something, you've got to say something, which Ken then spoke about. They identified very early in the process when they were reflecting on where they were culturally. People wanted to say something, but they didn't know how to, and they didn't know how to because it could have been their role, where they sat. And so they were so invested into the feedback framework that they wanted to create a system that supported anybody saying something. And I think he spoke about that, and then when you asked him and prompted him, he spoke about the feedback he got. And I thought, well, if that isn't a fair indication that they've created a framework where everybody feels comfortable to give that feedback, and that should be what organisations aspire to. Like, you should be wanting to get feedback from everyone in the organisation, and people should feel safe no matter what their role is to be able to give feedback but safely and respectfully within the values of what your organisation is. But people should feel safe enough to do that, and that's how good organisations become high-performing, great organisations.
Absolutely. And it's not a flick of a switch.
No.
It's a dial you gradually turn up, and that's just I can't even remember the quote, but it's something like, if an acorn takes 100 years to grow, you better not waste any time planting it. And that's, this reminds me of that, and by the way, someone's going to ring in up and say an acorn grows really, really quickly because I've got the wrong mahogany or something. I don't know. but if a tree takes a long time to grow, then don't waste any time planting it. It's exactly the same here. This is not a flick of a switch. It takes a long time to grow. So get the seed in the ground. Yeah,
and I think that the final thing that we'll finish on is get the seed in the ground. That seed is when he spoke about they use the human synergistics model, which is what we use a lot with our clients. And he said, they were thirsty for the data, and that data is what created what we call is the gap. And once they got that data through the human synergistics products, they could then look at what was creating the gap and deal with it that way. And that's always what we speak about our clients is, where's the gap between where you are, the reality right now, and where you want to head. And that gap provides you with that insight of what you need to do. And for them, when he said they were thirsty for the data, I just thought, that's just an organisation that was always going to achieve great things out of this process, because they they knew that the work was there to be done, and they just wanted to get in and get the cold hard facts and do it.
Kirralea, as always, another great episode. Loved it. It's just fun to talk about this stuff, and it's even more fun to get out there and do it.
Absolutely it is.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Authenticity, Shaping High-Performance Workplace Culture. If this episode has provided you with strategies, insights, or inspiration, head to your favourite podcasting app and make sure you subscribe to be notified of future episodes. To get a sense of how your current culture measures up, you can take our Authentimeter, a free online assessment. It will take you about 10 minutes and give you an indicator of exactly how authentic your culture is. You can find that at authenticity.com.au/podcast.